Hi, writer. Want my support to get your book finished and out into the world? Join my Inner Circle membership, a community of supportive writers where each month we set goals, share pages, learn new techniques, and get you unstuck fast so that you can make continuous progress on your writing goals. Coached Writers Finish. And you can get me as your virtual book coach in this group program for only $199 a month, much less than a single one-on-one coaching session. Check out the details at suzyvidori.com/inner circle. We have live events happening all the time, so grab your spot now to join us. Welcome to the Show Don't Tell Writing Podcast with me, Suzy Vidori, where I peel back the layers of how to wow your readers with your fiction, your nonfiction. Anybody can bang out a first draft, but it takes a little more work to make your book as amazing as it can be. Join me as I share the step-by-step writing techniques you could apply to your writing right away, as I host successful writers who share a behind-the-scenes look at their own writing lives, and as I live coach writers on their pages, giving practical writing examples that will make your own writing stronger. Nobody is born knowing how to write an engaging book. There are real and important skills that you need to learn. On this show, I cut through the noise and get you all the info you need. I can't wait to see how this information is going to transform your writing. Today on the Show Don't Tell Writing Podcast, we're going to talk about creative burnout. What is it? How to prevent it? What are the warning signs? Do you have it? We're going to answer all of these questions because today my special guest is Erin Noller, who is a neurodivergent writer, and she's a writing coach who's been helping writers with ADHD since 2020. She's also the acquisitions editor at Divine Feminine Publishing. Her short fiction has been published in a variety of journals and anthologies, and she's currently working on her own novel that explores the narcissistic cycle of abuse through the frame of speculative body horror. She is an absolute gem, a colleague of mine that I enjoy spending time with, and we dreamed up this episode about a month ago when we were together at a conference in Denver, and now we're just getting together to record it to talk all about burnout and make sure that it doesn't happen to you. And if you are in the throes of it, she's going to help you out with some strategies to get through it. We want to make sure that your creative energy is protected and that you keep going on that awesome book that you're working on. Welcome to the podcast, Erin. So good to be talking to you again. I have been thinking about this topic since we met in Denver last month about burnout and creative burnout and now I'm wondering if I'm there. So I'm hoping, I think we're all probably wondering this if we're listening. So yeah, I just want to chit chat with you and pick your brain because this is something that you work with writers all the time on. What do you mean specifically by burnout? What does it mean?
So usually when writers come to me who are in a state of burnout, it's writers who have been, it's really common that they have an MFA maybe, and they've tried to maintain the momentum of the MFA program they were in and all the work they had to get done. And when that doesn't work to maintain that momentum on their own, then maybe they're signing up for workshop after workshop after workshop, just trying to keep the external, motivation going. Or they're like, so it's this, and they get to a point where the creative energy, like the creative fire, where all of that desire to make something new just starts to, they can't access it anymore. And it gets, then there's this out there is this idea that you have to write every day, or you have to produce, that you have to publish, that you have to blah, 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 right? So pressuring themselves with that idea, then they just push harder and then they just push harder. And then all of a sudden it's like, there's nothing left there. Everything they used to do doesn't work anymore. So all those ways that they used to be able to externally motivate themselves to create have stopped working. And so then they're like, what they feel like broken, or they feel like it's a state that I often call creative despair, because it's like this intense, deep desire to reconnect with something that makes you feel like who you are, right? That creative impulse is why we all got into writing in the first place. And then when you're not able to access it, it can be really terrifying and really devastating. And we get sort of, I have gotten, and I know writers have gotten, I call it just really angsty, why can't I just do this? Why can't this thing I used to do on a regular basis for fun, I can't access it anymore? And it can be really scary. So there are other symptoms of burnout from other, like, new parents that can experience burnout, or if you've had just like a really demanding job, you can experience burnout. If you, I mean, may think right now in 2026, we're all kind of burnt out because of the world. So there's lots of different types, but the writers who I work with come to me specifically because they're like, I need to be able to access this part of myself and I can't anymore. And I don't know how to get that back.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah.
So we're specifically talking today about creative burnout. So if you are in this spot right now, dear listener, we have going to have some relief for you and some ideas. But even if you're not experiencing it today, I think
Mhm.
probably, Erin, we're also going to talk about strategies for listeners who aren't there, but how to prevent it, right? Like,
Yeah, yeah,
so
yeah.
with that, okay. So I just want to couch this episode by saying, hey, this episode's for you if you're there, but also if you're not there yet. This is a really, really
Mhm.
important one. Can I ask, because when I'm listening to you talking about this
Mhm.
and writers saying, okay, I'm feeling the pressure, I'm doing these things, how does this stage differ from sort of the catch-all phrase of, and I don't know what your theories are on this, I have my own, but of writer's block. How does
Yeah.
that relate? Because people just say, oh, I have writer's block, and then they just kind of just sit there with it. Like, how does how you deal with burnout relate to that topic?
That's a really good question. And actually, that's where all of this work for me started, is that I had
Yes.
experienced writer's block. I knew writers who talked about writer's block. It's a really frustrating and kind of like, I want to just call it like a stupid term because it doesn't
I
tell you
agree. I agree, by the
what it
way.
is, right?
Yeah.
It's like, so if we're going to, let's maybe define it real quick, which is I'd sit down to write and I can't. And so within that word can't is like, what does that even mean? And so now I'm questioning if I'm answering your question, but I'm just trying to like open up this topic, right? So what I will talk to writers about is like, okay, when you sit down to do the work, when you sit down to write what you call writing, I'm finger quoting here for those people like to call or to
Yeah,
write.
because they won't see you. They
Really?
won't see you.
Yeah. Well, what does that mean? What are you physically doing with your body, with your mind? Like what is happening in the room when you sit down to write? Because that means more than one thing, right? That means like daydreaming. That means taking notes. That means, and at which part of the process are you not? Where is the can't? If I can't write, what does that mean? Does that mean you don't, we like, feel like you don't have ideas? Does that mean that when you sit down to do the work, you distract yourself intentionally? Does that mean you never sit down to the work because you're like afraid to sit down because you're afraid of what's going to happen? And so I think that's one of the most important things is to get really precise about is when you say, or when somebody says they have writer's block, what part of the process are you talking about? And what aren't you able to access like within your process, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, so because it's not just there are so many different activities, tasks that we have to think of ideas, we have to write the ideas, we have to sort of free write, we have to write with intention, we have to write with planning, we have to look at outlines, we have to edit, we have to write, and then first draft, second draft, third draft. There's a lot of different activities in there. So which part of the process is tripping you up? And then once that happens, we need to talk about like, okay, so for example, it's when I sit down to do anything at all. I sit down and say I'm going to write, and instead I organize my desk, or instead I reply to a bunch of emails, or I'm avoiding, avoiding, avoiding. So if that's happening, what are you afraid of? Right. And if you're afraid of like, and if it's this constant, like I have to write, but I can't write, and I have to write, but I can't write, what's probably happening is that somewhere in that fear of like the fear of what will happen when I sit down to do the work, the answer of what's holding you back of what's causing the writer's block, right? So what's inside of that fear? Are you afraid that a lot of the time it's like writers who had some big moment of inspiration and like a book or a series of essays or something like poured out of them, and they want that experience again, and they're afraid that if they sit down to do the work again, that sort of download from the universe like won't come in the same way and it won't be as satisfying, and they're like, so they're afraid of that. So that's like one example too, but like it's that like what's that the writer's block itself is a combination of like what are you afraid of when you sit down to do the work, and then also sometimes that fear is due to like a very real reaction to the fact that you may have been pushing yourself too hard, right? So sometimes the resistance inside of writer's block is valid information for you that you have been pushing yourself too hard. So we have to look at what are you afraid of when you sit down to write? And also maybe that fear is a valid fear. So let's look at it, because if you had been pushing yourself to produce content like without refilling your energy and refilling your creative energy, refilling your cup, then that fear is valid. That means like that there's like two parts of you at war with yourself. One part who says, I need rest, and one part who says, but you have to write a book because that's your dream. That's who you are. You're an author, right? So there's these two parts often warring with yourself, right? Yeah.
I mean, that's amazing. And there's so much to unpack there, and I can't wait to do
Mhm.
it. I love talking about this in this way because you're so process focused. And I love that you work on writing processes with your writers, because my former background is in operations and process. So that
Yeah.
I think is in matrices and process. And so, but one of the things that you talked about in that explanation, I mean,
Mhm.
yes, writer's block is sort of a catch-all. Burnout is one of the components or one of the reasons why you might be experiencing that or might be the end
Mhm.
result. But also that there are a lot of different parts that go into writing a book. And there's a lot of
Uh-huh.
focus on, when people talk about, oh, I coach writing process or something, they might just coach write every day, right? And that's
Yeah.
one thing, and write new words every day, or what's your word count, or
Mhm.
those types of things. There's so much focus on that one thing. And I love the
Yes.
example that you used where, it's the Hollywood example. We sit down and the muse came and we just type, type, type,
Mhm.
type, type, and it's just like amazing and perfect. But that isn't reality, right? Like it might
No.
be in moments, but it's not going to happen all the time. There's all
Mhm.
kinds of other things that you need to do. I like to say it all has to get done. And sometimes that's a mindset shift for writers to understand that it's
Mhm.
not just about producing new words, that there are other feelings and other
Yes.
pieces to this process. So yeah, that was cool.
Yeah, and I love having that conversation because it's something I asked repeatedly as like a new writer. I was like, okay, but how did you write the book? And it's usually oh, I sat down every day and I just worked on it. Right. Like writers who are very successful often don't know how to answer that question. They don't know how to describe their process. And so when you get very specific and precise about what goes into it, then you can look at energy like required for each of those types of processes, right? So the energy of like generative energy, generating new work is different than editing energy. And that's different than querying or submitting for publication energy. And that's different than the marketing stuff you may have to do, like book signings or being on podcasts or, like pitching, to different, what have you. So, like all the marketing stuff. So, those are all parts of being a writer. That's all part of the work. But the energy required for each individual person, like for me, the generative stage draws the most energy for me. Like I have to be trying to do that like in the morning. I have to like devote more time to it. And I have to, right? But like I love editing. I just love editing. And I know writers who are the opposite, right? They love that first draft and it just comes out and then they hate having to edit. So, but being really honest with yourself and again, really specific and precise about the energy levels required for you, because all writers are different. For each part of those processes helps you understand, like if I'm feeling burnt out, maybe for a while, all I'm doing is something that feels lower energy for me. So maybe I'm just editing existing work if I have enough of it to edit, if that feels lower energy, or maybe I'm just maybe I'm just kind of like, so I write short fiction. So for me, a low energy exercise is just looking for new publications where I might send my work. So things like that, right? So that can be something that you actively decide. Like I am starting to feel burnt out. I'm starting to feel tired. I'm starting to feel, like, can I look at my process and identify parts of it that will require less energy? So I feel like I'm still getting something done, right?
Absolutely. And I think
Yeah.
so, listeners, if you're listening to this, make sure that you're giving yourself credit and celebrating
Ah.
all of those things around it. Because if you don't do that, your brain's
Mhm.
kind of mean, right? Your
Yeah.
brains can be mean,
Yeah.
and it will tell you that you're not doing the work because you're not
Mhm.
creating new words necessarily. But listen to Erin, she's super smart, and know that all of the work has to get done. And successful writers, I love what else you said, that successful writers often can't explain what it is that they're doing. And this is one of my pet peeves about some of my colleagues who will teach, how to write a book in 30 days or 6
Ah,
weeks or whatever.
yeah.
And or how to write without an outline. And you're like, okay, but this is your 35th book and you've kind of figured
Mhm.
it out and you're not really explaining. And you're
Yeah.
not, you're not saying that this idea actually came to you 2 years ago, just like somebody else's, right? So there's pieces of that process that sometimes get missed, even by
Mhm.
professionals, that they don't
Oh, yeah.
realize that they're doing. And that
Mhm.
happened to me when I first quit my job in 2018 to do quote unquote all things writing, as I kind of use the catch-all, because it's not just writing, right? It's
Mhm.
coaching writing and it's helping writing
Yeah.
and it's editing and it's doing the podcast and all the things. I've immersed myself in it, but I'm not writing all the time, but I thought I could. And so when I'm working full time, I was able to go to a writer's retreat and plan for it and sit down, once every 2 months and get 10,000 words in a day, right? Do not write that number down and say that you should be able to do that.
That's a lot.
It's a lot. It's ridiculous. And then I was like, well, okay, now if I'm going to write full time and I can hit $10,000 or $10,000, I wish $10,000.
Yeah, right.
10,000 words a day. How many books could I write? That's not how it worked, right? I found I couldn't do that because I didn't take into account the thinking time and that's one of the ways that you can show up and not be able to write is if you haven't made decisions, right? You don't know what you're writing. That all takes time.
Yes.
That all takes time. Okay. So burnout showing up in writers is them either not sitting down to write or sitting down to write and not being quote unquote, right? And then breaking down everything else. How does burnout in creatives differ from, say, burnout in a parent? Is it different?
Oh, that's a good question. I think that burnout can be more obvious, I think, in other areas when it's not like creative burnout, I think is sometimes harder to identify. You can feel like, I think like as a new parent, so just as an example, like it's very obvious that you're burnt out because like taking a shower feels like way too much and you're just like staring into space. And it's like, yeah, my son is 10, so I've had some distance, but still, like that's a very obvious kind of burnout. Or so that's like, I think with creative burnout, I think in a lot of ways you could feel sort of okay. Like the rest of your life can be going smoothly. You can be like not necessarily super stressed, not necessarily, but it's when you try to access, it sort of, I think, feels like some part of you, one of your senses has been kind of like flipped off.
Oh,
right. So it feels like
writer.
deadened. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So it's there. It's like a part of your experience, a way that you experience the world, that it's a sense that's been deadened. It's like being deaf to a certain part of your experience. And I think that, again, it's like I'm going back to what what you just said and what I had said before about like trying to sit down to write and then avoiding it, right? There's that one, or sitting down and like nothing really happens and feeling that fear. And then I think it's this back and forth, like where I feel like what starts to happen is there's this message of anxiety that's like, you should be writing, you should be writing, you should be writing. Why aren't you working on your book? Why aren't you working on your book? And instead you're like watching crappy TV or you're scrolling on your phone. And I want to talk about that a little bit too. Because
or watching good TV. No.
Or watching good TV. Right. I do, because we can talk about that too. Because like if we talk about like intentional ways to recharge, TV is one of them for me. But I want to talk about like the phone and social media. I'm going to come back to that. But like the way we shame ourselves and punish ourselves, like you should be writing, you should be writing, you should be writing. So, and I think that's what starts to happen is you feel like that part of you that you have this, you have memories of yourself in these moments of creation of your work that just feel so amazing. And you have that memory and you want that again. But then when you go to like seek it out, it feels sort of deadened. It feels like you can't access it. I can remember I wrote about this. I went through a phase of this after starting my coaching business in 2020 and also going through 2020 and being a single mom of a 4-year-old. And like, I felt like my creativity was like behind me. Like I would turn around and it wasn't there, but I could feel it like in the background, but I couldn't get to it.
Do
It
something,
was like,
Erin, do something.
Or just like, it's, it was like right there, but it was like, I couldn't see it. Right. Almost like it was like haunting me or something. I was so frustrated and I was so angry. And so it feels sort of almost ghostly. I almost want to say, like, I know that sounds kind of,
I write fantasy. Ghosts are welcome on this podcast.
It's like haunting you, right? It's like, I'm not crazy. I know I used to be able to do this. Why can't I do it now? And I think that, but again, other parts of my life, like I was managing, I was paying, getting the bills paid. I was like doing my coaching work. I was, enjoying myself in other areas of life, but it was like that one thing felt like something was missing. So yeah, that's how I think it differs.
And I mean, this feeds in nicely to my next inquiry here, because I want to know, like, nobody's talking about this. Writers all the time. Why is burnout overlooked or ignored in our industry? Because it's not being ignored in other places. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's shame. I think it's that it comes back to that expectation where we tie being a writer into our identities. And like, this is who I am. And I'm an author and I'm a writer and I'm a creative person. And you look around, and this is also that comparison, right? To other writers we often don't like talk about all the time is when we haven't been able to write, or when we do, we almost maybe romanticize it a little bit, because then I was able to write my amazing book because I'm trying to sell my book, right? So it's like, it's not something we talk about a ton. And I think that like what we were talking about before, where that sort of Hollywood romanticization of sitting down with like the quill pen and like the words are just flowing and the montage with the typewriter and what have you, right? We have that idea of writing in our head. And so when we're just like taking a walk for the 50th time and we haven't put a word on the page in 2 or 3 or weeks or a month or whatever, and we just feel frustrated every time we sit down to try it, there's shame in that, right? Because you've like, again, if we're not talking about it, and so we don't want to project that part of ourselves because it doesn't align with this ideal of what a writer's life should look like.
Yeah. And can I
Yeah.
also offer, just as
Mhm.
you're thinking, I mean, I don't know if this is the answer. I want to float this by you,
Yeah.
but it is something that happens to writers often in that
Yeah.
we have support networks.
Mhm.
And, if you are failing as a parent or burnt out as not failing, but burnt out as a parent, people will notice, your child will
Yeah.
scream. You might be tired. Your in-laws
Mhm.
might come and help you, as mine
Mhm.
would, like there's things that will happen. And if you are burnt out at your job or with your family, people will notice and there will be
Mhm.
consequences. If you are burnt out as a writer and not fueling your creativity, there may not be people in your life who
Mhm.
notice, right?
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
in your immediate sphere. I know if you're anything like me, my agent, my colleagues, a lot of people are
Mm.
remote. I
Mhm.
do have people who will come up to me at a writer's conference and say, number one, are you doing as well as it looks like you're doing on social media? And
Mhm.
the answer to that is, yeah, I'm having a great time. And then the
Mhm.
second question is, but are you writing, honey? Like, and that's
Yeah.
the attempt at shaming. And for me, like
Yeah.
I'm a binge writer. I write in cycles. I know
Mhm.
how to protect my like I kind of have some of these things figured out. It's not perfect.
Yeah.
But I'm okay in the phases where I'm not writing. I'm okay because
Mhm.
I'm working
Yeah.
on, 100 books a year with other writers. And to
Yeah.
me, that's amazing. And I know I can recognize that my creative energy is going to
Mhm.
my listeners' books, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm okay in those moments. And then when I want to come back and do that, I have to do things differently, right? But for
Mhm.
a lot of writers, would you say that why we're not talking about it or why it might be hard to diagnose is because they don't have people in their lives that actually notice when they're not writing? I don't know if that makes sense.
It does make sense. And I think that there's also a lot of writers who, like, unless you actively have a relationship with an agent or an editor who is expecting work from you next, it's all, driven by your own motivation. So, like,
Yeah.
you have to be the one who decides when you're going to write next. And so, yeah, I think that's very true. And I think that's something that a lot of this is such individual work too. When I say the work, I'm not just talking about the work of writing a book. I'm talking about the work of like on yourself to figure out how to,
Recognizing and looking after
yeah,
your creative
yeah,
spirit, really. Yeah.
exactly. And I love something you just said, Susie, when you're talking about your creative work and you mentioned I can recognize when my creative energy is like showing up in the work of the people that I help and that feels satisfying to you. And that's a really important thing to note because like that means that you're doing what you're doing, you're not creatively burnt out or creatively blunted or creatively, right? Because you can recognize that and you feel satisfied by the work, right? Right?
100%.
Yeah. And so
Will I
that's
go
the
back? Will
second
I go
thing.
back to fiction? I will. I will go back to
Yeah.
fiction.
Yeah.
But,
And but like let's say, again, it's like even if you didn't or you shifted, you're like, I feel like writing nonfiction or I feel like
that's
writing
what I'm doing right now.
essays or
Nonfiction, and somehow
yeah.
it doesn't satisfy that creative itch the same way it
Yeah.
does do it. But I'm running it for all of you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you'll get to a place where you're like, okay, I'm at a place where I know it's not enough and I know I need to feed that need for myself. But that's part of what, when we talk about, at the beginning of this episode, talking about those of you who know you're experiencing burnout and those of you who are wanting to make sure you avoid burnout,
Yes.
is to start paying really close attention to those because it's gonna have to come from you. No one is gonna recognize that from the outside but you. Do I feel satisfied in my creative work? Am I feeling a lack of something? Am I feeling grief that I haven't been able to work on fiction? Like I'm writing nonfiction, but I miss coming up with imaginary places and imaginary characters. And I'm feeling grief about that.
Yeah.
Being able to recognize that is a big part of recognizing burnout.
Yeah. And I think don't let us, listeners, if you're listening going, oh my gosh, I thought I was fine, but now I feel shame that I don't feel shame. We don't need that spiral.
No.
If you feel satisfied, then that's cool. Okay,
Yes.
so before we talk about how to prevent it, what are some things that writers are actually doing that contribute to burnout? Besides, I mean, we just talked about
Mhm.
one of them, which is, that self-talk or shame around it.
Mhm.
mean voice that says, you're supposed to be doing something. That's
Mhm,
one. Are there other
mhm,
things that writers do that you see that maybe we're not aware of that are actually
mhm.
contributing to burnout?
This is going to go hand in hand with the shaming thing, but I think it's a good way to recognize it because this is so huge. And it's borrowed from therapy. Like if you are a person who's been to a lot of therapy, you've probably heard this before. And it's like the shoulds, like shoulding yourself. I
Yeah.
should be doing this. I should be doing that. So it's a matter of like the classic one is the write every day, write a certain number of words every day. I should be writing amount of this amount of time. I should be blah, blah, blah. So, and it can even go so far as I should be writing this specific book instead of writing the other book I really want to write. I should be writing this in this genre because that's my genre for whatever, right? Right. So anytime that you find yourself using that word a lot on yourself, that's a really good thing to look at and
And
be like,
not paying attention to what your creative spirit is actually pulling you toward, right? Like,
yes.
yeah.
And
Okay.
we can't always just immediately shift to like the thing our heart desires, right? However, but listening to that part of yourself, like, yes. So if I'm telling myself I should be writing in this genre and I really want to change genres, sometimes just acknowledging, yes, I've been writing romance, but what I really want to write is horror. I'm like desperate to write horror. I can like, if I recognize that feeling and I can like acknowledge it and honor it and be like, yes, you want to be writing horror right now. Let's just see if we can finish this book, right? But let's acknowledge that that's a desire for you and let's see if you can find a way to meet that desire a little further down the road.
Yeah.
So definitely I think shoulds anytime that, oh, I know this is the biggest one. And we actually talked about this at the retreat. I brought it up with the group and it's resentment. This is so huge. So one of the first ways to recognize if you are pushing yourself towards burnout is that there are parts of the work, of your work, that used to bring you joy and you are starting to feel resentful of. The writing every day. If you're starting to like, when you sit down to do your daily writing time, if that's what you've been doing, and you're looking at that blank page and what you feel is resentment, that's a warning sign. That's a huge warning sign to stop what you're doing and reevaluate all of what you've been telling yourself you should be doing. Because
That
that's like,
comes from an external pressure, right? Like comes from
yeah,
somebody else's expectations if you're resenting it.
no, because it's not necessarily coming from an external source. It may be coming from you. Part of the reason you may be resentful is that part of yourself is trying to force the process. And there's a part of yourself that is legitimately resistant for valid reasons. Like, I'm tired. I'm tired. I don't want to write every day. I'm drawing from an empty well. And there's part of you, like, I think of this as like my inner toddler that like throws a tantrum. And if my inner toddler is throwing a tantrum and refusing to write, that's not happening in a vacuum for no reason. It's happening because part of me is exhausted or part of me knows I'm working on the wrong thing or I'm pushing the project in the wrong direction or what have you. So resentment happens before it's the first trigger, like the first emotional trigger to know that something is not going right.
Okay. So I'll make this joke now to say that I was wrong and don't confuse resentment towards your current project to resentment in the people in your life who are keeping you from being able to write because
Well,
they need you.
that's a therapist question.
That's so clear.
Resentment is actually a really good tool in other areas of your life, but I feel less qualified
I
to
am not a
speak
therapist.
on that.
So here's some of the warning signs: resentment, you're not
Mhm.
writing, all of these things, feel like you can't access it. How can we prevent
Mhm.
it? What are some, like, I know it's going to
Mhm.
be different for everybody, but what are some of the top tips to
Okay.
nip in the bud, move past it, prevent it before it
Um,
happens?
yes. The first one I'm going to say, and this is also my first recommendation if you're like, oh my gosh, I feel like maybe I am more burnt out than I realized. But it's not going to be very popular. And it's the phone. It's the phone and it's the social media and it's the scrolling. And it's you needing to let your brain get bored. That is so, and then there's so much research to back this up. We've known this for years now. And the scrolling on your phone and social media is addictive. It was designed to be addictive and it sucks out your creative energy. It sucks. It just does. If you lose so much time to it, and your brain needs to be able to get bored and your mind needs to be able to wander in order to rest, right? In order to rest, in order to be able to access your creative energy, you have to be able to daydream. You have to be able to daydream and like enjoy getting lost in your own daydreams rather than just getting lost in somebody else's Instagram feed, right? This is so important. And a lot of people don't want to hear that. And
I want to hear it.
Yeah.
I want to hear it. I mean, how many perhaps listening to this podcast might be a little bit different. I mean, how many people can say they come up with great ideas in the shower or on a walk, or like
Yeah,
when they're just not doing something,
exactly.
not fully engaging their
Hmm.
brain. That's when it works on, or in the nighttime. How many of our
Hmm.
listeners have a notepad by their bed and to
Yes.
capture those
Yes.
ideas? And it's because of that, right?
Yes.
One of our
And it's also
colleagues,
not. Oh, go ahead.
yeah, I was gonna say one of our colleagues, Michelle Hazen, who is decided to take on a few sir projects. She has this technique that she talks about if you are not feeling it, to like set a timer and lay on the floor and do absolutely nothing for 5 minutes.
Wow.
And I
Yeah.
just think it's amazing. She told me this 3 weeks ago. I've thought about it. I even thought about it this morning. I
Hmm.
haven't tried it yet because it just seems so unproductive. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Michelle, if you're listening. But I'm gonna try it. I'll report back, but I bet it would
Okay.
work. And I haven't felt like I needed to do it either. So I haven't experienced it
Yeah.
because,
Well,
but
and
just
I'm
like,
really,
laying on the floor, and I'm like,
yeah.
I never thought about just laying down on my floor. Like I don't do
Yeah.
that. I don't know.
Well, and just shaking things up a little bit in that way. And
Yeah.
then, but I will also say for those of us, because so I'm neurodivergent, and the idea of doing absolutely nothing sometimes kind of just terrifies me, just because like I have to at least be fidgeting. And so I also recommend pacing. Like with no phone, nothing else around, pacing for 5 minutes, incorporating physical movement into that, into the not having your phone, and to doing nothing, and to letting your brain get bored can help. But yeah, so any way that you can incorporate some downtime in that way. I had another client who is a therapist, and she was really struggling with this. And we had a conversation where I realized that other than the like very quick 5 minute shower she was taking, she was in conversation with clients and her family 100% of the time. Like her partner was the one who made dinner, and like she didn't drive because, and so I mean, there was no time for she was just, she called it quiet contemplation. She's like, that doesn't exist in my life. And when she realized that, she was kind of just shocked. Like as a therapist, she understands the importance of this. And so she just set aside a half-hour block on her calendar to just like sit in her office. And she was allowed to have like some markers and paper if she wanted to like draw, but she wasn't allowed to read. She wasn't allowed to talk. She wasn't allowed to listen to anything but music. And so that was like a huge recharge for her that she discovered. So you can get creative with this. And it can be something that you enjoy. Ideally, experiment, but it's ideally something you look forward to, especially as you get used to like doing it more often. And I will say I have taken I don't have any social media anymore at all. Except for now, Substack is like kind of creeping into like social media territory, but I don't post on there and don't look at the feed thing. But I do technically still have a Substack. I'm getting mad at them for the way
Yeah,
social
I
media.
think it's turning into
But
more and more
yeah,
of the same, right? And this is the
yeah.
problem. I'll
Mhm.
say this once, but if you're not paying for something, you are the product.
Yep. Oh
You
yeah.
are the product, and you are
Mhm.
being used, right? And all of these things. And I certainly don't use, I mean, I do use social media in terms
Mhm.
of being able to communicate with all of you and
Yeah.
sharing information, but I use it less and less now to communicate with humans, and we
Mm.
do it other ways, and I certainly don't consume much of it, or I try not to.
Yeah. And I
It's
think,
getting
yeah.
flooded with garbage, right? Like, I don't know.
Yeah. And I also want to be understanding of the fact that's not practical for everyone. Like there are also certain like jobs where you have to, like, I know I have a friend who's a tattoo artist, and like there's the only way for her to like get new clients is through Instagram. That's where people look for tattoo artists. So it's not always practical or feasible to just completely disengage from social media for everyone. And that's a long but
Especially
different
not for
to
writers.
understand.
Writers too,
Yeah,
right? When
exactly.
we're
Yeah.
promoting our books and things.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. So,
So you also promised us that you would talk a little bit about some of the strategies to recharge, and that TV was
mhm.
good, right? Let me hear about that one. No, I'm just kidding. I
No,
like to
no, we
justify
can talk about that.
My Netflix habit by saying, well, I'm consuming story, because what I literally do,
And I think
my
that's true.
superpower is
Yeah.
breaking down somebody's writing and being able to figure it out, right? And I do the same thing when I watch television. Don't watch
And isn't it
television.
fun?
It's so fun. I
My
ruin it for
kids still
everybody in my
mad.
family. Oh, I know, my
Yes.
kids. They were able to dissect the
Like
Hallmark movie
next.
when they were like 7. Oh, he's not gonna be the hottie. Like they know what's coming and before, yeah. So
Or does
talk
not.
about the ways to recharge.
Yeah. Well, and so that I love that you said that too, because like it's just so true. And like with all of this stuff too, like let's say you're like, but Erin, the way I disconnect for a really tough day is I watch funny animal videos on TikTok for 20 minutes or something. And it's like a set specific time. And so I think that the most important thing, and this is going to be true with everything I've said today, is that the larger work here is learning how to pay attention to yourself and to really listen, not to what society tells you is supposed to be recharging, not to what you think you should be doing to recharge or what you should be doing to write, right? Like none of the shoulds, but paying very, very close attention, honestly, to what is happening inside of your own body and inside of your own mind and just inside of your emotions when you engage in activities. So the TV is a great example because like this is one of the ways that like when I was having my own experience that I disengaged from social media during that time because I tried setting boundaries around it and that didn't work for me. And I do think it works for a lot of people, but it didn't work for me. But one of the things I realized I needed is I need just like an hour, maybe two per day where I am just watching, like, sometimes it's like old TV. It's like maybe old procedurals. I love me some Law and Order, like something like that, where there's like
Bum,
a,
bum.
yeah, but there's, it's formulaic. I can kind of be just enough engaged in the story to like turn off the worrying and turn off the like my brain going 100 miles a minute. And I'm usually doing something else while I'm watching TV too. I'm like fidgeting and folding laundry a lot of the time because I have kids and they have a lot of clothes. And so, but like maybe I'm just tidying or even like picking up or like moving around, but my brain is off and I'm kind of just like in my own head and I'm carried along by the story. Like you said, so TV honestly is a big part of that. But I have, I'm trying to think of some other examples of what other, I had mentioned the client that just set aside a half hour of time in her office to just like listen to music and maybe like draw and color a little bit. Again, physical activity, exercise, but this is where it can be tricky because I would want your listeners to think of the first thing that sounds relaxing to them and try it and not like the thing that should be relaxing, like taking a bath or taking a walk or something someone told you to do, but what feels truly relaxing. And if it's reality TV, it's reality TV, right? If it's half an hour on TikTok watching funny animal videos, then that's what it is too. But then what I would caution you to do too is like, okay, pay attention. How do I feel afterward? After I've done this, do I feel rested? Do I feel recharged? Do I feel like I've gained a little bit of just the ability to take a deep breath and like, come back to the rest, like the world feeling a little bit refreshed, or do I feel worse? And that's the really important part is how, paying very, very close attention to what your responses are, because that's all that matters. You're the only one inside your own head. You're the only one who can know if what you are doing, if the activities you're engaging in are making you feel better or worse, right? So it takes some experimentation. And the only thing I would say to try for sure is something along the line of Michelle's lay on the floor for 5 minutes, some way to let your brain get bored. So incorporate some way to let your brain get bored, mind wandering, staring out the window and daydreaming, letting yourself escape to the world inside your head instead of escaping into somebody else's world. And then also other things that just make you feel good, that just make you feel rested. And I've talked to enough writers who have been like, I don't know what that is. Like, I have been so busy and so burnt out, I have no idea. That's when you're like, okay, what I want you to do is block out a half hour or an hour if you can, and just try almost anything. Just sit and stare, do the 5-minute floor thing. You have to start somewhere. So you can start with just about anything, but you have to block out the time and you have to be intentional about it.
I'm still working on that. I mean, I've tried lots of things. I've tried meditation and things. Not for me. I mean, parts of it are good.
Yeah, it's not for anybody.
But I also need to recognize I'm not in the same camp as many writers because I'm extremely extroverted, which is unusual. And so for me, spending time with family or friends or kids can be that, not that I let my brain get bored, but I'm not thinking about work. I'm not thinking, skiing or swimming, like activities that I actually like. Versus exercise, which I think of as going to the gym, which I absolutely hate.
Yeah. That's important too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Awesome.
And that's
great,
exactly right.
Great tips. Okay. If there was one thing that you wished more writers practiced on a weekly basis, what would it be?
Intentionally getting bored. It really, really is. That intentionally getting bored is so important for the health of your brain, not just to mention the health of your creativity. And it's like letting yourself get to a place where you enjoy that time and like giving yourself enough of a chance and like as long as you're not actively being distracted by something, as long as you like do have a chance to get bored, it doesn't matter what you're doing. You could be riding a bike. You could be like wandering around the grocery store. You could be like, it almost like, but you just have to like let that part, the constant attention grabbing, turn off. It's that. And then also, you said one thing, but
I did, but you could say two, because
I'm just thinking if there's,
everybody's different.
I think, and I'm going to say the other thing is pay attention to when you feel resentful and listen to the parts of yourself that are feeling resentful, because some of that negative self-talk, it's coming weirdly. It can be really mean and we want to just tell it to shut up a lot of the time, but better than That is like getting curious about it. So when you start to feel resentful, to ask the part of yourself that's feeling that, like, what's going on, get curious about it, really, really listen to what, like, again, I think of it as like my inner toddler. Why are you so resistant? And be honest, like, not why are you so resistant, but like, so what's going on? Why are you feeling resistant? And to get really quiet inside your own head and listen to try, because like there's valuable information inside of that resentment and inside of that resistance. The resistance is meaningful. And so if you can listen to that resistance, whatever it looks like, you're going to get valuable information to help yourself be and do and engage in the things that you enjoy, right?
Absolutely. Okay, I'm going to ask you a question, and I think I'm going to know what your answer is since we've trained by the same people and with the
Yes.
same accreditation.
Mhm.
Is it ever time to walk away? Is the answer ever to walk away from that writing?
Yes, it is. And that can be really scary. So always remember, like, you can always change your mind. And that's the thing I think we get so like, I have to finish this book. I have to finish this book. I have to finish this book. And so what I will tell writers when I'm like, well, what if this isn't the book, right? Or what if this isn't the project? Or what if you're writing in a genre that you don't feel good about anymore for whatever reason, or what have you? That can feel so scary. And to remember that, you can put a time limit on it. I'm going to walk away from this for a month. I'm going to walk away from this for 6 months. I'm going to give myself some time and see how I feel. And then I'm going to come back to it and reevaluate. So like, just because you decide to set something down, there's no rule saying you can't pick it back up again. And you can even set yourself a reminder, like on a calendar that says, I'm going to put the book away until September. And I'm going to set myself a note on my calendar that's an appointment with myself that says, take it back, reevaluate, the book title, whatever it is, the book that you're working on, reevaluate this project. And so even if because I know for me, that fear comes sometimes like, am I going to forget to pick it back up, or am I going to abandon all the writing, right? It's like a very catastrophizing that you can change your mind. Like, you don't have to be locked into that. Yeah. But if you just feel like you're punishing yourself, and if you're feeling really resentful, that resentment and that resistance to something, that may be why you may need to set it aside.
Yeah. I mean, and do you miss it? Like, I like to call it, and I do miss it a lot of areas of my life.
Yeah.
We're talking about it, where I try something on for a little while. It's like that overwhelm comes when you haven't made a decision. So make a decision and see how it feels. And if you don't like it and you go down path A at the fork in the road and it sucks because the trees are bare and it's scary, then maybe you go back and try path B, but you're not still standing at the fork in the road and deciding what to do. I was thinking of a big decision that I made when I was 16, so a little bit different, but was quitting ballet. And there was a lot of shoulds involved. I mean, I never liked doing ballet. It was never my choice. It was just something I grew up doing. I mean, I'm 5'10". I was never going to be a professional ballerina. It's not okay. I'm like 6'5" on point or something. But being away from it for 10 days and taking a vacation and not missing it and being like, I don't just going back, and being like, all right, I'm never going back. And I didn't. And my parents were like, but we already paid. I'm like, how much? And I was like, woo-hoo, here's the money. Worked it over, and best money I ever spent. It's just like, I don't miss it. So yeah, I mean, if you're shooting yourself into it, it is sometimes okay to walk away, but try it. And if you don't miss it, if you miss it every day and you're crying because you're not writing, then go back.
Of course. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. So quick fire portion of this segment here. You have an anthology coming out. How long did that anthology take from the time you first heard about it or thought about it till when it's going to be published?
Okay, when it's actually out on April 14th, so it's really soon. So, and I have to say, I was co-editor of this anthology, and my co-editor is Janina Scarlett. And so she and I kind of conceived of this. She had the initial idea, which is short stories told from the villain's point of view. And so then we kind of like, which I adored. I loved the whole concept. And then we put together an open call for submissions. And we did that over the course of a couple meetings together. We love working together. It was super fun. And then we put the call out. I'm so terrible I have such time blindness when it comes to like remembering stuff like this. Yeah.
Less than a year.
Yeah. But Janina lit a fire under everybody because she's that kind of person, which is excellent because I am not. And so if I had been doing this by myself, I would probably still be editing the story because like, I can be such a perfectionist with that. So we work really well together because she's like, no, we got a deadline. But then when like the deadline blows past, she's really kind about it. So again, really, we work really well together.
Telling all her secrets.
Yeah, she's fantastic to work with. I adore Janina. And so, but I think with that balance, it was really good because then we were able to get this book out relatively quickly. And one of the reasons I'm so excited about it is that we have a wide variety of experienced authors. So we have authors who are very experienced and have a really large following. And one author, like this was from one of the very first things she ever wrote.
Oh,
So like,
so exciting.
oh my gosh. So that, and they're all promoting each other. So like, we're going to do a local book signing here. I have a Canadian author and she is the only one going to get it.
Amazing.
So we have
That. I don't know.
her name is Morag Worrell,
Okay.
and so she's got a short story. She also writes nonfiction, and so yeah, so there's going to be a signing in San Diego. There's a signing here in Colorado, and so it's all these authors supporting each other too. So that's the other really exciting thing about it. It's called the Villains Club, and the pre-order links are live now.
Back to our quick fire. When was
Yeah.
your first big break? Like the moment where you knew that all things writing was going to be your job?
You know what? I had never not wanted to be a writer since I was born into this world. In fact, oh wait, I don't think I have one. Oh, I do. I still have these I started making books before I could. I'm showing a picture.
I have ones like that too.
Yes.
Like that's
And so
stapled together. Yeah.
Yes. And I always named my main character Sarah because we the only name besides my own name that I knew how to spell, that I could remember how to spell. And there are no words in a lot of these. Like they're just pictures. Like this one has some, but like I even have little ones made of sticky notes.
Did you want to be
before
an
I could even
illustrator?
read. No, well, I always liked to draw
Okay.
too, but
So it's always known that you
Always,
wanted
yeah.
to be. Okay. What's your best advice for newer writers listening to this podcast who want to break into the writing scene?
okay, so that's tough because like there's this whole angsty journey I feel like you take as a writer where it's like, just remember that publication doesn't necessarily mean it's not like it's not permission, right? You have permission to write whether you're published or not forever for the rest of your life. And I think it always needs, it's easy to say this after you've been published, but it always needs to become from a place of joy and like passion for the work. And you don't need permission from any publication or like any, like having even self-published, you don't need permission. Like you are a writer once you decide that you're a writer and you keep writing. And so just remember that your voice deserves to be heard because you exist and because you decided to be a writer. So no one needs to give you permission to do it. And just kind of, I don't know, remember that. And like, remember that choose environments where writers are supporting each other and not where they're like heavily criticizing you or trying to compete with you. So choose supportive writing environments where you lift each other up as much as possible, because there are some, I would say, some more kind of toxic writing communities like that exist. And I'm talking tiny groups. Like it's not hard to find groups of writers
I
that
agree,
would be
but
more.
but if you join one
discouraging.
of those and you have that experience, it can create a lot of lasting effects in terms of
It can.
your writing.
And I know because those people are my clients all the time.
Yeah, exactly. Or it's
Yes.
like my fourth grade teacher told me I can't write. Yeah,
Yeah.
all of those things that we carry with us, you need to be
Mhm.
careful, because I love what you just said. And because honestly, I was actually really shocked when I joined the writing community that people were as supportive, and I was lucky that
Yes.
people were as supportive, because I expected it to be more cutthroat. And I mean, I
Yeah.
think it's just kind of how I roll, that I find the positivity in everything.
There's a lot of good
Um,
folks out there too, though. There really
There are,
Yeah.
but it's true, because you don't need to see other writers as competition, because guess what?
Yes.
It's a cool industry where you don't have to choose one pair of shoes, right? If you walk a mile in my character's shoes, guess what's going to happen? You're going to love it so much. You're going to want to walk a mile in Erin's character's shoes as well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
actually, my success, I mean, we like to say a rising tide lifts all boats, but
Yeah.
certain industries that kind of isn't true, because you either have an Apple computer or a PC, probably don't have both at the same moment, right? So
Yeah.
in books, if you love one book and have that experience, mine, I actually just created a reader for you. Like
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
success actually makes your book have a better
Mhm.
shot at success, especially if it's a similar genre or
Yeah.
a similar theme or something. So
Yeah.
we're not in competition, guys.
Mhm.
So let's support one another. That's what this podcast is all about. So I couldn't have ended
Yes.
it on a more positive note, Erin. Where can listeners, if they want to work with you on their processes, they want to talk about their writing processes, they want some advice, they want to work through this process with you and resolve all of the burnout, all of the things, and make sure that they're on their way, where can they find you?
I am at erinwritesmagic.com. So it's Erin, ErinWritesMagic.com. And all my stuff is there. And that's got my author page, and it's got ways to contact me, get in touch with me. I do have a Substack. You can find that from my website. And it's mostly just like, so I have ADHD. And so I write a lot about that on the Substack. So there's articles about that in there. But yeah, it's easy to get in touch with me. There's a little form you fill out on my website and you can check.
Awesome and amazing. Thanks so much for stopping by the podcast today. And
It was so good to see you.
Super important topic.
Yes. Thank you, Suzy.
Thanks for tuning in to the Show Don't Tell Writing Podcast with me, Suzy Vidori. It is my absolute honor to bring you the straight goods for that book you're writing or the book that you're planning to write. Please help me keep the podcast going by helping people find us. You can subscribe to the podcast and leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you're listening to show how much you enjoy the show. That's how other listeners will find us. Also, visit suzyvidori.com/newsletter to hop on my weekly inspired writing newsletter list, where you'll stay inspired and be the first to know about all the upcoming training events and writing courses that happen in my community. Want my eyes on your writing? Submit a page of your current draft for a chance to come on the podcast at the link in the show notes. I'd love to chat with you about your writing in my always positive, incredibly supportive way so that you can make great strides towards your writing goals. I'm here to cheer you on. Remember, that book you're writing is going to open doors that you haven't even thought of yet, and I can't wait to help you make that it the absolute best it can be. See you again right here next week.